Angus?
Angus Walker ITV News. In previous years, I don't suppose bankers would be quaking in their boots because the Liberal Democrats were out to bash them, but the odds on Vince Cable becoming the next Chancellor have halved in the last few days. We'll see what happens. But have you had any talks with the Treasury about this, at least in theory? And also, won't these measures just cause queues at City Airport? The message is no to profit, no to money. You could strangle growth. You could put unemployment up. You talk about outrage and morally obscene, but people in this country would not forgive you for punishing a sector of industry that provides billions in tax revenues and directly and indirectly employs hundreds of thousands of people.
I don't think any government in this country could be or should be forgiven for not taking the measures which will protect this economy from once again having a gun held to the rest of the British economy by one vested interest, by one clique. That is what has happened. I don't think ever in modern British history have we seen one vested interest hold the rest of the economy so much to hostage with such long-term and damaging consequences, not least, first, of course, in terms of the billions, now estimated by the Governor of the Bank of England to be £1 trillion bailout, directly and indirectly, of the British banking system, which is going to cast a shadow over the public finances for years to come, is now leading, as Vince has explained, to banks hoarding the money we have lent them rather than lending it. Because of the government's actions, because of pressure being applied, as we hear yesterday from George Osborne, we're having exactly the wrong action by banks. Banks should be lending money at this point to viable British businesses, not doing what they did last year. I think RBS and Lloyds, having promised to increase lending, net lending by, I think it was about £20 billion, reduced it by £47 billion. This is great sucking noise as money is being withdrawn from the real economy where we need it, in order that they can wean themselves off the taxpayer and continue to carry on merrily as if nothing has happened. We can't just put Humpty Dumpty back together again. We have to understand that unless we fundamentally restructure our banking system, this will happen again at some time in the future. And what I think is unforgivable is that the Labour and the Conservative parties simply refuse to take the difficult and tough action required to make our economy safe. We don't have the luxury to pretend that somehow we can carry on as before. That is what lies behind our thinking. That is what will be at the heart of our approach to the economy in the manifesto tomorrow. Sean.
Thank you very much. Sean Dilley from UTV's TalkSport Radio. Question for each of you, gentlemen, on banking, Mr. Cable. These bonuses of £2,500, under your measures, would there be anything to prevent bonuses of £2,500 being paid each day? So £17,500 a week, £210,000 a year. Mr. Clegg, this is going to be very difficult for you, I appreciate, because you're not going to want to attack the opposition. But could you react to David Cameron's comments on not giving legal aid to MPs accused of fiddling their expenses and thus assuming guilt, getting rid potentially of fair trials and a right to a fair defence?
Well, on the first, it's a simple point. It's the job of the FSA, of course, to make sure that their rules are not treated with ridicule and to enforce them, and that's their job.
And on the latter point, of course, it's outrageous that Labour MPs are being given access to legal aid. Totally incomprehensible. It's a very fitting, dare I say it, fitting footnote on the last day, the last week of what I think will go down as the most corrupt parliament in living memory.
Why is it outrageous? But before, can I just put the answer to the table? Was the answer to my first question, in fact, yes?
The answer to your first question is that it almost certainly won't happen, but if anybody does try to make a monkey out of the rules, then it's the job of the FSA to crack down on it and stop it happening.
Thanks, both.
Adam.
I appreciate what you're saying about risk, but some people, I think economists, would argue that there probably is a linkage between profit and risk. I'm just wondering, bearing in mind that Dr. Cable has just said that a 5% shrinkage in the British economy is a major economic disaster, and you say you want a smaller banking sector, how much do you think your plans would shrink the British economy?
Well, these actions will not shrink the British economy. I mean, of course, the disaster could have been much bigger had it not been for the intervention of Western governments in the autumn of 2008. Not necessarily, not if the other sectors grow out of it. What we're arguing for is better balance. The City of London, the financial services sector, the financial services sector is quite an important part of the UK economy. Most of the financial services sector is not controversial, doesn't threaten the British economy with systemic risk. We're talking about a handful of banking institutions which have been important and arguably too important in terms of revenue generation. And that's got to change, and the economy's got to be rebalanced.
And Adam, I think we fundamentally disagree with what I think is the assertion you're making, that highly leveraged forms of financial transactions in the City of London are somehow germane to the long-term sustainability and growth. No, it's not a moral. It is a fact. But it is a fact. No, well, certainly not when, as I say, they're now, because of the way they can offset their losses in terms of tax, they're in effect not paying any tax revenue in terms of corporation tax, but also because, as I think Adair Turner first said, quite a lot of the highly leveraged activities which were taking place in the City of London were socially and economically useless for the interests of the wider British economy. And I think that's the point. We're saying, fine, if they want to carry on doing that, but don't do it at the cost of the real economy and at the cost of retail banking. And that's why we think a structural separation, akin, not exactly the same, but akin, of course, to the Glass-Steagall Act introduced in the 1930s in the United States, is now required. Allegra.
I just want to pick back over some of your older policies. On Monday you said that the poor are paying more in income tax than the rich, and that's gone up since '97. Last night the IFS said that was meaningless at best and misleading at worst. Which is it?
We strongly disagree with the IFS, and I'll explain to you why. The IFS, if you look at their very detailed statement they put out yesterday, in effect count benefits as negative taxation. So, for instance, I'm just hypothetically, if someone is on an £8,000 salary but receives benefits in £12,000, they will say to you, the IFS, that they are being negatively taxed at £4,000. Our approach to benefits, the way we have based our calculations, is that benefits in effect count as income. And by the way, we're not alone thinking that. That's exactly what the Office of National Statistics do. So we've taken the methodology of the Office of National Statistics, where we just simply disagree with the Institute of Fiscal Studies. And can I just explain, so that if someone was in that position, what we're saying is they have an income of £8,000, benefits of £12,000, that is income of into the household, into the family of £20,000, then we calculate how much they tax. So we agree with the ONS, we disagree in terms of methodology. We count it benefits as income, not as negative taxation. And I'd also say, actually, from the point of view of people who receive benefits, from people who are on lower incomes, I frankly think our definition, the definition of the ONS, is the one that counts in everyday life. You don't sit there and receive benefits and say, oh, that's negative taxation then. You say, well, that's the money I've got to pay my bills, my council tax, and the other taxes I pay. And that's why I think the approach that we have made, and there's one more point, which is, I think, being slightly lost in this technical argument. Yes, there is a philosophical difference of opinion between ourselves and the Labour Party when it comes to helping people on the lowest incomes. Our whole approach is not about making them ever more dependent on an ever more complex benefit system. Our approach is quite simply to give them more of their own money back.